They will be talking about 2006 Toyota Sienna V6 3MZ engine. Today we will concentrate on the engine control module, the pin out of the engine control module, the pin out, and under this place here we have the location where it's being located. Here is where the accessories, the ECM and the ECU, door lock connectors and all of that. And here, this is where we have the engine control module here, this particular junction here. So this box is what we will be talking about. And if you look at the diagram here, you will discover that this engine control module is located at the passenger side, under the close to the AC vent there. Now let's go down to the major topic of the day, the connector views. Here we have these connector views here. This connector views here is the connector of the brain box, which is the ECU, engine control module. You discover that here we have 5 connectors, or 6 rather, but one of it here there is space, so this will not be counted. Now we have the first one here. You start counting from the right hand side. We have the E4 here, we have the E5, we have the E6, we have the E7, and we have the E8. Now looking at this here, there is pins connected to each of these. When you look at these connectors very well, you discover that under this E4 here we have number 1 to 7 here, the first line, 8 to 17, the second line, 18 to 25, the third line, and 26 to 31, the fourth line. It's been applied to every other connectors that we have on this particular engine control module. Now this E4 here is an indication, a symbol of that indicates the first connector, and this E5 here is still an indication also, and it's applied to the remaining ones there, the way we have the E5, E6, E7, and E8. Now here is a connector. On this connector here now, we'll be talking about, first is a battery. Here is the symbols, the terminal number, the wiring color, the terminal description, condition, specification, specified condition. Now on this we have the battery here, and here is the battery. This battery here is telling us that this pin E4 3 and E6 1. Now this is the first one here, tells us that is the E4 3. The number here is the color symbol here is black and white. Now on this E4 3 here is the E4 3. This is it, this particular place where you are seeing my cursor here now. This junction is the E4 3. Now, and it's applied. If you have this brain box with you now, you can the EC, the engine control module, when you bring it, looking at this, you see in every color being indicated there. When you go down to the vehicle, you discover that each of the color that is indicated here now, you find it in the vehicle body. And the second one here now is the E6 E61, which is the wiring color here is brown. We have brown here. The terminal description here is battery, what it controls. That is what it means, what it controls. When we talk about terminal description here, we are talking about what it controls. Here we have the battery for the E4, 3 and E61. This simple means there is two lines that come from the brain box, the engine control module, that's being connected to the battery. Now this is used for measuring battery voltage and for ECM memory. It keeps the ECM memory intact and it measures the battery voltage, and it sustains the memory of this engine control module. Now when looking at the condition, you discover that even when the vehicle is not in a motion, when the ignition has not been turned on, when you are not driving the vehicle, provided that there is battery inside the vehicle, this is always active. And when you try to read the voltage, the specified voltage, you discover that between these two wires you have 9 volt to 14 volt. Now when anything below this 9 volts, there is a problem. There you will have what we call DTC, diagnostic trouble code. Or if it's above 14 volts, then you still have the same. That shows that there is a problem, and this is applied to every other pins. When you are looking at all this diagram here, you discover that each of the components or the pins coming from the ECU comes with a specified condition of voltage that it's required. Now the second one on this page here, we have the power source, the power source of the throttle motor. Where does this power source that controls the throttle motor? Now looking at this, we have the E56. Now here is the E56 here. This is our E56. This is it here, where you are seeing this cursor here. If you have the brain box and you want to check the wire color, now the wire color of this Sienna, this E56 here is red. Now the second wire, because there is two wires that supply this power source of the throttle module, then you have E61, and here is our E61 connector here, the first one here. If you go to this E61, you have the color wire on that body of the vehicle, as you see brown wire there. You see the brown wire there. And now what happens, whether this ignition is on or off, you discover that you keep on having 12 volt. That is what this condition always means here. You keep on having 9 volt to 14 volt. Anything below 9 or anything above 14, that means an ECT will be set. And when this ECT is being set, diagnostic trouble code, that shows there is a problem. Is either the check engine light will begin to blink all the time, and you may now use your diagnostic machine to be able to find out what the problem is, in order for you to do the analysis, still using the software that we are using to analyze the wiring diagram of the vehicle. Now the third one we have on our this thing here is the ignition switch. What controls, for ECU to be powered on, even as we have the battery being connected steady there, that should be the steady current. When we talk about the ignition current, you must turn the ignition on before the ignition current can be applied for the ECU to be able to open, for one to be able to run a diagnosis, or for one to be able to start a vehicle. Take it for instance, if the ignition is not on, on this particular vehicle now, and you go to the engine to crank it directly from the kickstarter, I will tell you that the vehicle will not start. The engine will revolve, the engine will crank, but the vehicle is not going to start. Why? Because the ignition pulse is not there. There is no voltage going down to the brain box to be able to open the brain box for it to become alive. So now on this note, we have E49 here. This E49, the E49 controls, is one of the wire that controls this ignition. Now the ignition must be on for one to obtain 9 to 14 volts. That is just a simple ideology there. Now the other one we have here is the battery, the positive part of the battery, the positive part of the battery. Now we have these two here, the black and red, as the number 1 for the E41. The E41, you know, the connector of the E41. Now at the same time, what it controls here is the power source of the engine control module. Now for this thing to work out, the ignition must be on for this battery power to come in. And what is the specified voltage for this is 9 to 14 volts. 9 to 14 volts. Now anything above this or below this, the ECU will not be able to power, or when the ignition is off, the ECU will not be able, the power source will not come down to the ECM. Now we have the next one, which is still a battery, the positive part of it, we'll call it plus 2B, and under this, where this pin comes from is E42, the E42 and the E61 is still the same power source. It's still the same power source of the ECM. The ignition must be on, the same volts. Now the next on this page here, we are talking about OC1 plus. When we talk about the OC1 plus, we are talking about the camshaft timing oil control valve. Camshaft timing oil control valve, that is the abbreviation of this. Now this, we have this on the E616 for the positive. Then for the negative, we have E615. You will now look at these two things, that on this particular number here, this is 6 here, we have the 16, which is here, 16 and 15. These are the two places where we are referring to. And when looking at this, you see the color wire. The color wire differs. You can look the difference here. The color wire differs. So these two things here, one controls, the other side of it controls the bank 1, while the other one controls the bank 2. We know all what the banks means in a V6 engine. V6 engine will have the bank 1 and bank 2. The ignition must be on. And what does the specified condition of this? What it does is it generates signal, which is pulse generation. It talks about the signal that comes from the timing oil control valve. Then the next on this list here, we have here is this EFI refer to what the relay that controls the ECM, the engine control module. Now the pin where this comes from is E48 and E61. You can look at it, black and white and brown. These are the two wires that control this, and here the ignition must be on for this relay to turn on. Once the ignition is not on, the relay will not be on. And at the same time, the 9 to 14 volt is a specified condition for the volt needed over there. Anything above this, that means it will not actually work out. Now the next one we have here is the power source for sensors. The power source for sensors, a specific voltage for the sensors needed. The specific voltage for the sensors needed. Now we have here the E818 and the E828. These are the where we have this is the E8, 18 and 28. This one here and this particular one, they are even close to each others here. You discover these two pins here. One of it, we have the yellow which is E8 18 and the brown which is E8 28. The condition here still remains that the ignition must be on for this power source for the voltage to be in order. If the ignition is off, that means we may not have what we refer to as a 4.5 to 5.5 volts. So the ignition must be on. And when the ignition is on and we'll have below this 4.5, that means there is a problem. Maybe by the time we'll have 4.1, there is a problem, or just 4.0, or we'll have a 6.5 or 5.8 volts. That means there is a problem. Now the next one we have here now is a massive airflow meter. Here we still have under this E830 and the E829. Here now what this does here is, if we must obtain this volt here, the engine must be in idle, that it must be steaming, and the shift level position P or to N, AC must be off. The AC must be off, but the engine need to be on, and you don't need to engage this on a D or revise or even on a 2. You just need to put the gear level on the P or N, and your AC must be turned on. Then you can be able to obtain 0.5 volt to 3.5 volt. Anything outside or below or higher than this specified condition here, that means there is a problem. The next we have on this pin here, on this particular page here, now we have the intake air temperature. We have the intake air temperature sensor, which is that at the same time the engine still need to be idle. The pin here is E820 and E828 on that the particular socket or connector there. Now if this engine is idle, the intake temperature must be under 20 centigrade. Under 20 centigrade. Now this, if all these things are being obtained, then the specified volt should be 0.5 to 3.5 volt. If it's more than this or below than this, that means there is a problem. If it's more than 3.4 volts or below 0.5 volts, that means there is a very big problem. The next one we have on the here on the deck, our decks here, is engine control temperature sensor, and the pin that controls this on the connector is E819 and E828. This is the wire color here. The engine must be steaming, idle, and the engine's coolant temperature must be 80 centigrade, and the volt we want needed to have is 0.2 to 1.0 voltage. Anything outside that, there is a problem. The next here is a throttle position sensor for engine control. Now what controls this? What is the pin? The pin is E821, E828. Yes. Now the ignition switch must be on, that is a condition, and the throttle valve fully closed. You don't need to press it, then you obtain this particular volt, 0.5 to 1.2 volts. Anything outside that, there is a problem. The same thing is applicable to this. It's a ignition switch must be on, throttle valve open. If the throttle valve, you press it, is open, you have this volt here, but when it's closed, you have this. Then the last but not the least on this particular page, of which we are still going to go to the second and third page in the next episode, or in the next clip that we are going to still push on our YouTube channel. You will have here E831 and the E828. Now this is throttle position sensor for sensor malfunction dictation. When the sensor has a problem, maybe if you are trying to accelerate a vehicle and there is a problem from the sensor, maybe from the wiring or from the ECU or from the module actuator whatsoever. This is the line that dictates the problem, the particular line that dictates the problem. Now ignition switch must be on, accelerator pedal release. You don't need to press it, your leg needs to be free off from that, then you can obtain this kind of volts, 2.1 to 3.1 volts. Then the next one is ignition switch on, accelerator pedal depressed. Then you can be able to obtain this particular volt, 4.5 to 5.0 volts. Anything outside that, there is a problem. Thank you very much.